Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Live with Littledata. I'm joined today by Tyler Bell from Prismfly. Hi there, Tyler.
How's it going, Ed?
And well, going
Thanks for
well.
having me.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming on. And this week, as we're following on from our launch of our official launch of our Klaviyo connection yesterday, talking a bit more about retention marketing with Klaviyo, and particularly about kind of how we can optimize kind of abandoned browse and abandoned cart campaigns. So yeah, start us off, Tyler. Perhaps just give us a quick sort of overview of the kind of what you're doing, Prismfly, and the kind of services you offer.
Sure. So, head of lifecycle at Prismfly. So the brands we work with are typically brands who are doing $5 to $80 million in revenue on Klaviyo. But what they've found is that they've kind of plateaued in sort of their email marketing efforts and specifically in automation. So what we'll do is we'll give them an audit. We'll hop into their account and sort of identify where things aren't going right in the flows. And that has a lot to do with audience selection, personalization, value proposition delivery. And then we'll sort of redo their flows, redo their emails, and then stay on top of it. A lot of brands don't really, have their finger on the pulse, so to speak, with their Klaviyo accounts. So we're sort of that party that's responsible for making sure that everything is flowing correctly. There's no sort of overlap between your flows. You're not oversaturating your audience. And so we've seen some really awesome results for our clients and have a lot of great revenue wins.
Excellent. And typically when you're taking over an account, has it been something that's been managed kind of internally by a marketing manager of the brand or another agency or a mix?
I would say that for the bigger brands, like maybe north of 15, 20 million, they usually have their own marketing teams. But for most other brands, they use vendors. But what we see a lot of times is that just because you have a marketing team, it doesn't mean that your marketing team has enough experience in sort of life cycle or email automation, So a lot of times they'll have a marketing team where an email specialist, is there, maybe a marketing director, but none of them have been in Klaviyo for, let's say over 5 years or anything.
Yeah, right. It's a new technology, and as you say, and I think it's so important that, isn't it? The tactics kind of and what works is evolving all the time. So, kind of being able to see concurrency across a number of different accounts is pretty valuable.
Yeah, that's kind of like where we have an edge as well, is because we get to run so many tests and we get to try so many different strategies that we can apply learnings that we have from working on so many accounts to new accounts. So it's a much broader perspective we're able to lend.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was reading a post this morning about kind of whether, given all the changes to particularly this year in terms of the way Google and Yahoo and others are classifying email spam, and is email marketing still working? And the answer is yeah, it's just evolving, right? I mean, how long is email marketing been going for? Nearly 30 years. So still current.
Email marketing is not going away. It's cost effective, and I think that a lot of marketers are afraid of the changes that Google's making. But to me it's kind of like the inverse. Google's making changes so that people have a better experience using their email inbox, and that's we're fine with that, because people are going to look for things they need in their email. I don't really necessarily think it's something to be afraid of or anything. It's just something that we got to move with the market.
Yeah, I mean, I actually take a contrary position, which is that, all those people doing dumb stuff, blasting to a big list, they're the ones that are going to fall out the inbox, right? So in a way, if you do it right, you have more cut through than you would have done last year.
That's exactly what I agree with.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about kind of abandoned carts first of all. Kind of why should a brand do run abandoned cart campaigns? What's the opportunity?
So abandoned carts are one of the flows that have the strongest buyer intent signals that you can use. And also you have the data, the zero-party data that's supplied to you instantly to be able to execute on a very personalized, very tailored email about the product that they're interested in. So abandoned carts have always been one of the most successful sort of email automations you can use to drive revenue, because you have, number one, the data about the user, about their purchase intent, and then you have the means of communicating with them to help drive that conversion. So I think a lot of brands will see abandoned cart as one of their most valuable flows, until they've really sort of dialed in their post-purchase one. Because, I think at the end of the day, retention is sort of, it's the bigger win. But in terms of getting, a conversion on the table from email, abandoned cart is one of the most effective.
Yeah, and I think perhaps the obvious point there, we'll come on to a bit more with Littledata, but obviously, in order to be able to retarget them, you need their email or SMS to be able to do that, right? So these are probably more likely to be people who have previously bought from you. Not necessarily they might have signed up for your newsletter, but it is ultimately it's somewhere between acquisition and retention. Like it's a bit of both in some cases.
Agreed. And the other thing about abandoned carts, I don't think people realize of how valuable it is that it really is for a great segment of people who have fallen out of your flows. So let's say they have signed up for the welcome flow, but haven't converted during that time and have kind of gone past that time window, and then they take another look later on and add it to cart. You're able to target that user a lot more accurately than with a campaign send. And then same thing with post-purchase is, a user might have purchased, gone through your post-purchase flow, finished that flow, and now they're kind of in nowhere land, so it's like they're only getting campaigns and stuff. So their re-engagement to add that item to the cart is such a great way to get them back into a flow with great information to target them.
Yeah. So let's talk about the sort of the triggers. I guess it works really well if you can target them, and I think you've been testing out Littledata's integration the last month and seeing that actually there's an opportunity to probably target a bigger audience than you might currently have. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So this has to do with the way that Klaviyo's default trigger is set up. Klaviyo's default trigger, and for anyone that has set up a Klaviyo account and sort of imported the default Klaviyo flow, they call it abandoned cart, but it's not truly an abandoned cart. And what I mean by that is that Klaviyo uses the Shopify trigger for checkout started. They don't use the information from the actual add to cart action. And what we know about conversion is that through every step of the conversion funnel, people drop off. It's the nature of conversion. So when you're talking about the difference between people who have only clicked add to cart versus the people who have actually pressed checkout, in a lot of cases that can be a pretty wide margin of people where, but sort of they're the same audience, similarly in terms of representing purchase intent. So for Klaviyo, you think that it's an abandoned cart flow, but it's truly an abandoned checkout flow, and they're users that are further down the funnel. So there's a lot of users that are higher up in the funnel that have added to cart that you're not engaging with.
Yeah. And perhaps to make the point, I should just share this graphic that I've used a few times recently. Just like these are the sort of average stats from Shopify of people. Shopify's benchmark say about 6% of people add to cart, and he's had only 4% of those check out. But the key point is the Klaviyo checkout started event is actually only triggered when they enter an email in the checkout. So it's that third step down, the 3% of people who do that. So in pure metric terms, actually targeting people add to cart is double the opportunity than targeting people who get to that second step of checkout.
Yeah, this graphic's really great. Yeah, I remember when you first showed it to me, I was like, and it's funny because this is something that I've been talking to a lot of brands about, because Klaviyo does offer some sort of workaround that you can do to kind of set up a true abandoned cart. But in my experience, it's not super effective. And so it's always been kind of a thorn in my side that Klaviyo doesn't let you have a great add to cart functionality for use as a flow.
Yeah. Now there is you can add that there is a sort of script to added to cart event. I mean, in our testing, we had about 40 stores doing the private beta. I think about 4 of them had actually added this, so it's very few people actually managed to set that up. But then the further challenge is that even if you do add that script and you are adding to cart, the number of people who will actually, the number of times you can link that action before the checkout to an email profile is very low. There's a reason that Klaviyo doesn't trigger the checkout start event on the actual first step of the checkout, and that's because the user's not yet logged in or identified themselves. And Klaviyo can't handle anything that's not linked to a profile. It has to have an email or SMS attached to be relevant in marketing terms. So yeah, basically what Littledata is doing is not just enabling that added to cart event to be triggered server side, but also enabling that added to cart event to be linked to a Klaviyo profile where possible. And it's not creepy. It's just doing the basics of making sure that when they've either volunteered their email to you, they filled in a newsletter sign up form or similar quiz, something like that, or when they've previously gone through the checkout, or when they've clicked on an email. Those are the three main ways we identify users. Those people can be those actions they take can be linked back to an email address.
I think that's another good point to make here, Edward, is that there are other services that offer sort of an integration or a way to target abandoned cart people. And in my opinion, it's a little bit nefarious, because they'll aggregate brand data and profile information between companies who are sharing it. Then, you're sort of bringing that data into Klaviyo, which kind of lends a risk for it being inaccurate data, number one. But also number two, whether or not you can validate that those people have allowed their data to be shared in that way. In my opinion, it's a little bit nefarious. So, when you first told me about your version of it, I was really excited and impressed by the fact that you're only using the data that you have available to you.
Exactly. It's first-party data. We're not using any third-party lists. So we're not adding people to your Klaviyo list. If they're not already on there, they won't get on there. We're simply allowing you to better target the people who are already on that list. And I think that's I'm glad you brought that up, because I think the thing about using third-party email lists is that in Europe, it's kind of not legal. In the US, it is totally legal, but it has implications, as you say, both for deliverability, but also for spam. Like, people are way more likely to report a spam if they feel like they didn't opt into the list. And so, given that now, any 3 out of 1,000 emails getting marked as spam basically hammers your deliverability. I don't know. I'd take the risk.
Yeah, I think that it creates an experience that isn't really good, because at the end of the day, we want people to, understand and know who we are and be familiar with the brand in a way that, I always say that you should have a relationship as if they're your friend, and if your friend hasn't given you permission to text them, you shouldn't text them, so I think that, using another company's third-party data to try and, email someone, I think is kind of wrong.
Well, also, more the point is, where do they get that third party? Because maybe like, if they're using someone else's data on your brand, who's to say they're not using your brand data with someone else? It's sort of, I'm not saying they're definitely
or the accuracy of it. I mean,
yeah. Now we have a question just answered from someone on LinkedIn, just saying, is this Shopify specific? So the answer is yes. At the moment, we can only do this for Shopify because it relies on a very deep integration with the sort of Shopify backend, effectively what's happening on Shopify servers, and the cookies that Shopify set. So we may bring this to other platforms that use Klaviyo in the future, but at the moment it is only for Shopify stores. I'm sorry if you're on something else, but if you're on Shopify, then please have a look at the link and get going. Okay, cool. So kind of basically, you've got your audience, you've got your flows already set up for abandoned carts. If you add Littledata integration, you can basically have a bigger audience that you can target. Talk us a bit more about the results you were seeing in the trial.
Sure. So, I mean, I think it's also important to mention just how easy it was to set up, because that's kind of another thing as well, is that, how long does it take to set up? What sort of, do I have to do any coding? Do I have to do anything like that? It was like it literally is like a one-click process. So that got to give you guys a shout out on that one. It's super easy to do. And then it works instantly. The trigger is automatically in there.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
I'm saying Klaviyo now allow this integration, like one-click install on their side, so that really helped.
Yeah, so that was like, if we take even a step further back, that part was really good. So in terms of the results that we saw, it did take a little bit of time for users to kind of like get into the trigger. and for the user to start going through the flow at a rate that was like, because when you first turn it on, you're trying to compare it 1-to-1. You can't really do that. You got to let it kind of marinate a little bit and kind of really, you got to give it a wide enough data set for you to give it a comparison. But in general, we were seeing a 40% increase. If we say that abandoned checkout and abandoned cart are the same in this scenario, where we're just classifying them as like, that sort of flow went out. If we just counted abandoned cart flows from Klaviyo's regular integration, that number was increased by 40% after turning on Littledata's integration.
Yeah, that was just huge. And yeah, just to cover that point about kind of letting it run, I think it's a good point. So if you're a new install with Littledata, it is going to take a few weeks to like get up to full speed, and that's because if you think about what I just said about how it works, like people who previously checked out or entered the email kind of before the period that you install the app, we can't go back in time and link those to identity graph. So the more time it has, I mean, obviously in most companies, I'm not saying then like you're sending abandoned cart emails to people who purchased 2 weeks ago. I'm just saying what we need to gather is their activity on the storefront more generally, and that enriches the audience building. And so I would say, yeah, it's going to take weeks. And to be honest, I would expect the performance to only increase over the following months, because there's still going to be some people who come back in a few months' time. We have up to a 12-month look back window that you can do. So even after a few months, it's going to improve. So for existing customers that are later, you're lucky because we've already been building that identity graph here in the background over the last few months. And if you turn on the Klaviyo integration, you're going to get instant boost. If you're a net new customer later, yeah, it'll take a bit of time to warm up. Cool.
I think in general, another thing that was really useful about the Littledata integration is that the way that you're able to target the items that were actually in the cart, I believe, is superior in the Littledata's execution of it than in Klaviyo's. I don't understand. I can be honest that I don't fully understand why, but I can tell you that I have seen a better ability to conditionally split users based upon the item in their cart, because I like to use very personalized emails in our flows, and I can see a better filtering being done in the Littledata's version.
Yeah, and there's two different things. I mean, it's sort of the same root reason, but the first thing is there's another reason why Klaviyo kind of pushes the checkout started trigger not added to cart, because the checkout started trigger, they have the actual full contents of the cart that go in the checkout. Now, what we've been able to do is replicate that exact same data schema for the added to cart event, which means that as you say, you can basically build an email template that says, this is the contents of your cart. Do you want to go back to that? Or maybe just pick the first item in the cart, depending on the style of the email. Including all of the kind of, the photos, the variant IDs, all of the descriptions, anything you'd want to include in the content of that. So that's powerful. But then you mentioned another use case for that, which is that you may, I'm quite interested to hear your views about this, but I guess some people may not want to target necessarily like the exact contents of the cart, but more pick up like the product category or the area of interest, and retarget more generally
Correct.
for that category. And that's again because we have all of those product properties included, which are not even available in the checkout started event. Things like product category, you can do all of that sort of trigger splits.
Yeah, the reason why I think that that's super valuable, just to kind of give some context here on this, is that there's only a certain amount of optimization you can do to abandoned cart emails. It's like we're kind of constrained by the amount of optimization you can do to this flow, because there isn't just so much data about how much we can personalize or segment. But because we can use trigger splits to, let's say, separate out by category, what I've done is, for example, with our client Redland Cotton, we have separated out, what type of item it was. Was it, a towel, or was it, sheets and bedding? And then with the hero images that we're sending in the abandoned cart emails, we're able to tailor it to the product of their interests. So we're showing sort of an email that feels like a bath email, in addition to telling you that you have towels in your cart.
Yeah, that's nice, actually. So you are telling them the actual items in the cart, but it's about the hero image is actually tailored to that product category.
And like the testimonials that we'll use. So we'll pull testimonials from the product categories that are being used in the abandoned cart as a way to use more value propositions and show more social proof about the item in the cart.
Yeah, that's super smart, because I guess obviously way more likely to be convinced to buy the towels if the testimonials about soft towels, right? Rather than the testimonials about the nice design of the pillowcases, and you're like, well, yeah, but that's
exactly.
So yeah, tell me a bit more generally. What are apart from obviously this thing about improving the audience, what when you take on someone else's abandoned cart campaigns, what are some of the typical things you might look to optimize?
It's tough, because like I said, your runway is really limited on abandoned cart for different avenues. So for example, with like a welcome flow, we might try a different length of flow, or we might try and segment users based upon how many times they engage with the product, or something to that effect. Like, and with abandoned cart, you're very constrained. So your two options for really trying to get more revenue from abandoned cart flow is increasing the audience, which you guys help with, and then is speaking more specifically about the items in the cart with the email. And I think a lot of brands struggle with that, because it's kind of like you just put in the abandoned cart block and it's like, hey, you forgot this item, good luck. But you're not doing any sort of communication about like why this item in the cart is great. And so for you to know that, you have to be able to predict, okay, I know which items are in the cart, so I can make an email that talks about the item in the cart. And so the way that you do that is by doing that sort of trigger splitting, so that you can filter out people. And then you can know that when I build this email and talk about these value propositions, that item is in the cart, even though I'm using a dynamic block.
Yeah. And I think, I guess that is, so that's so important to have the right sort of metadata about all the products and stuff to get that right, because obviously there's as you know, the worst thing about personalization is when it goes wrong. You're trying to deal with sort of super specific personalization, but it's actually not what I wanted. So I think that's one of the things we try and get right at Littledata, is making sure that if we're sending an event, that all of the product and customer data is going to be up to date and consistent, because otherwise it just ends up just misfiring.
Yeah, but to answer your question, like the only ways that I have seen to predictable impact on abandoned cart flow automations is by those two paths: either increasing the audience size or increasing the personalization based on the item in the cart.
Cool. Now we said we talk about abandoned browse, so let's just talk about that quickly. So I know we've only just launched the viewed product event in Littledata that would enable abandoned browse. You haven't touched around, but in more general terms, like what are the sort of opportunities? Because obviously abandoned browse means targeting people who haven't even added to cart. It's like another sort of step up towards the top of the funnel.
Sure. So abandoned browse is not only a great sort of way to gauge an interest in, let's say, a product or a page, but it's a really great cross-selling opportunity, because typically if you're in the abandoned browse stage, you're not necessarily set on the item. You have a lot more purchase intent when you do something like add an item to a cart. So with the abandoned browse, I view it as a way to sell more, on the, value of the brand, but then also say, you might also want to consider this, like based on your interests and based on the interests of, people who have viewed this product with our company, we know that they commonly purchase X, Y, and Z. So I view abandoned browse as a really great cross-selling opportunity and a way to try and move them further down in the funnel, but less strongly focused on like trying to drive an immediate conversion from the email, like with one click.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily like add all the stuff to checkout. It might just be trying to take them back to a different product to check that out.
Yeah, or just the different category pages as well. So talk more about the product earlier on, but then definitely like, and this is something I probably wouldn't do in abandoned cart, is give them more product options that aren't in their cart. It doesn't really make logical sense. But for browse abandoned, you really do want to kind of showcase some of the other options that are similarly aligned with what they've been looking at.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I guess going back to our previous point, like that's where having product metadata such as category is so important, because you want to be able to split out those campaigns based on the kind of intent they've shown you with different product lines, not necessarily that exact variant, but something similar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's about all we have time for in today's show. So thank you very much for sharing your insights. Please hit Tyler up if you'd like any more advice on lifecycle marketing and how to optimize that for your brand. And please do try out Littledata's integration if you're on Shopify. We've got a 30-day free trial. Links below in the comments, and please reach out if you have any more questions about that. So thank you very much for coming on the show, Tyler, and I hope you continue to see excellent results. Goodbye.